Hey friends, after being totally inspired by this week's guest, Ari and I have decided to start a band. Our band is going to be called The Virtue Signals, and we're going to write the most badass anti-SJW songs you've ever heard. We haven't really written any music yet, but we've come up with a couple of song titles, so tell me what you think. The first single is Sargon Did Nothing Wrong. But of course we know the best song on the record is never the single. The best song on the record is going to be the one called Why Can't We Just Be Nice to the Nazis? And another favorite is going to be one called Stop Killing My Language. Because, I'm tired of not being able to harass people in peace. It's just trolling, guys. Anyways, if you want to help fund our first album, head over to patreon.com/thegaytheistmanifesto and make a donation to support the show. Thanks go out this week to Elvin Engineer, Bethany, and Willow for increasing their pledge. Love you all, and thank you so, so much. Your source for news, commentary, discussion, and debate at the intersection of the atheist movement and the LGBT rights movement. This is the Gay Theist Manifesto. Hello and welcome to the Gay Theist Manifesto. I am your host, Callie Wright, joined once again by my fantabulous co-host, Ari Stillman. What's up, Ari?
Awoo. That's what my kitty cat is currently saying, because it's almost his dinner time and I lock him in the bedroom and he said, let me out, I want to eat the dinner. Awoo.
Poor kitty.
Yeah, he got a tough life. He got to live with the heathen parents and everything and has to deal with Trump instead of Ted Cruz being president.
And I bet he hates the fact that you podcast because it takes you away from him.
Yeah, that's totally what he's screaming about, and not because it's about to be his dinner time.
Well, I am super excited for this episode because I talk about being in a band years ago all the time, playing metal and hardcore, and I don't get to indulge that side of my life in activism or podcasting really. And I'm always excited when I find out that somebody I know in the atheist community likes the same bands that I do, because I feel like those are two separate parts of my life. Like, I can geek out on music with a certain group of people, and then geek out on activism with a different group of people, and there's not a lot of overlap there. But this episode is going to be a really exciting mishmash of the two. I'm really excited. So our guest this week is Lauren Kashan. She is the lead screamer front woman for a really badass feminist hardcore band called Sharptooth. Welcome, friend.
Hi, thank you so much for that lovely introduction. That's so nice.
Listen, the first Facebook message I ever sent you, and I don't I don't gush to strangers typically. I gush all the time, on the show and with people that I know. But I literally, I'm sitting at work. It's early in the morning, and my friend Jamie, who runs A Voice for the Innocent, had just seen you guys live, and he was posting about how amazing it was. And I was like, so first of all, you're a dick for not inviting me, because I'm only hearing about it after the fact. And then I went and I listened, and I was like, oh my God, I've never heard hardcore like this. Even if the lyrics weren't super political and feminist and awesome, I would still love the music because it's legitimately just that good. It's super energetic, and I even feel kind of jaded after a while. I'm even one of those people that's well, it all kind of runs together and sounds the same, but your guys just doesn't. And then I went and read the lyrics, and I was just holy shit, I have never heard anything like this before. And I was literally sitting there at work crying, oh my God, I hear me in these songs. This is awesome. So
that means so much to me. I cannot tell you how much I appreciate that. Thank you so much, both the complimenting the music and just in that you said you hear yourself in it. And that's what I want from Sharptooth. Is I want other women, I want femmes, I want people who aren't just this straight white male moniker face of hardcore. That's who I want to feel like they hear themselves. So that, you saying that really means the world to me. So thank you.
Absolutely. And so was that deliberate when you guys very first started the band? Was it we're going to have this badass activisty feminist hardcore music, or was it just kind of a natural thing? How did that work?
The folks in Sharptooth asked me to join twice. I don't even remember the first time they asked me. I'm sorry. But the second time, my last band was kind of wrapping up, and I was looking for new musical projects. Sharptooth was playing more post-punk, pop-punk type of music. And I was like, look, I don't really want, that's not really who I am. And if I'm going to keep doing music, I need to be creating music that where I can express myself both like musically and content wise. I was like, so if I work with you guys, we're going like, I want to go heavy and I want to be able to say the things that are like on my mind about like, just being myself in the world and like feminist issues as well, because I've always been pretty vocal about, like political and social issues. I just wanted to be able to express myself the way that I want. And they were extremely on board with that. They're like, no, that's why we asked you. And I'm like, okay, sick, let's do this. So it was a totally natural thing because, those songs were the topics that like I wanted to talk about, and like they happened to be feminist, but it wasn't necessarily going into it being like, this is going to be a feminist band. It just is a feminist band because of who we are as people. And then it kind of evolved from there. Like we've been able to hone in certain aspects of the band and make our activism more targeted and yeah, just kind of work with what we've been doing.
If you love screaming and you hate the patriarchy, you will love this band.
Yes, absolutely. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. I tell people that I'm like, yeah, if you are all about smashing the patriarchy and being loud as fuck, that's Sharptooth. Am I allowed to swear?
Oh, yeah,
swearing.
totally. Yeah,
okay, good.
No, you're good. So you posted, I don't even remember, something you posted on Facebook the other day, and I commented, I was like, oh my God, we need to commiserate on like the parallels between the music scene and the atheist community as far as like sexism and racism and homophobia and all that sort of stuff goes. Because when I first got into atheist activism, I wasn't entirely naive, but I was pretty naive, and I was like, oh my God, this is a place where it's better. And in a lot of places, it is. Like, I don't want to talk like it's all bad, but over time you start to realize like, no, it's actually just a microcosm of society at large. Like there are segments that are pretty terrible and segments that are pretty awesome, and a large spectrum in between. And did you kind of have a journey like that into music, or was it evident from the start? Like how did that work?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, so like I went to like art school, and so like kind of being into like punk and like more avant-garde like types of music was pretty normal in high school. Like that was like what everyone at my high school did because artsy kids. And when I started getting into heavier music, I definitely had that like, oh my God, this is the best thing ever type of feeling, because in some aspects were better. I'm like, wow, there are these shows where like, I feel like I can express these feelings that like, society tells me I'm not allowed to express, especially as like a woman. And here at these shows, like I can have these angry, violent, aggressive feelings, and there's nobody telling me I can't feel it. On the other hand, there's like, you still have that bullshit, like no clit in the pit type of stuff. So it's like, you're still kind of fighting an uphill battle. It's pretty much, I'm sure it's the same in most male dominated, like niche areas of society. So it's like, regardless of how progressive like punk and hardcore and metal are, the fact that they are male dominated is going to thus reflect a lot of the problematic stuff that comes with not having female representation. So
how stoked have people generally been? Because, when I initially started the show with my first two co-hosts, I honestly, I expected to have to fight and claw to get everywhere we wanted to go, with like guesting on bigger shows and even just like making the conversation about LGBT stuff and trans stuff specifically. And I was really shocked at how little of that I've actually had to do. Like a lot of the big players were really on board and like, yeah, this is a conversation we want to have. Let's have you on the show and talk about it. And have you experienced that? Have you gotten pushback?
For the most part, people have been extremely supportive, or at the very least, the people who are supportive are intensely supportive. And that kind of compensates for any like the naysaying, like sexist bullshit that we come up against. I think especially like where we are as like a society, it's at least like where I live and stuff. Like I live in Baltimore, and it's a pretty progressive and like fairly like liberal area. A lot of the Northeast is. So like over here, it feels like, oh yeah, sure. Of course people are gonna like respect what I have to say and stuff. I'm more curious as to what's gonna happen when we start touring down south and out west more and just getting like more exposure to different like cultural niches, because I'm in my little liberal Northeast bubble where everybody thinks it's cool to be like femme and queer and like that's fine. But once I venture out of that, I think it's going to be interesting. So we'll see.
and I have to ask, do you ever read the comments?
Virtually never. When we first announced, we just signed to Pure Noise Records fairly recently. And when we first announced it,
which I should say for people, a lot of people listening to the show, probably not super familiar, that in hardcore, that's a big deal. That's a real big deal. Just
amazing.
To set the context.
Amazing record label. They're kind of like, they kind of set the bar for like the way record labels are supposed to act and treat their bands. And like I can't imagine working with a better label. It's a truly an honor to be working with them. So when we first signed to them, the owner's super excited about what we're doing, super on board with our message, with like our activism, which is amazing having a label that backs us like super hard like that. And you would think like hardcore metal, like alternative music is going to be a little bit more progressive because it's outside the mainstream. But it was kind of amazing. I learned very quickly that day when we announced the signing that I will not ever read the comments on any of our YouTube stuff. I will never read the comments on other pages that post our stuff. I only read the stuff that people comment on the Sharptooth page itself and things that people send to me directly, because I kind of feel like a lot of times dissenting voices are often the loudest, and like, oh, people like something, they're just like, oh, this is neat, like it. If people have an issue with it, they're going to be like, oh, I don't fucking like this, type. So yeah, I learned pretty quickly that the good stuff will come to me. I don't need to read the comments for the most part.
That seems like a good idea, because I went to YouTube to listen to some of your music before this, and I looked at the comments, and I mean, there wasn't anything in the one that I looked at terribly vitriolic, but there was a lot of like belittling and dismissing and like, oh, I'm supposed to take this seriously. It has the word mansplain in it kind of stuff.
Like that's not a real fucking thing. Isn't that amazing? Yeah, there is a lot of belittling and diminishing of women in heavy music. So, and the nice thing though is that like people will say that and think those things, and then you come to a show and I'm screaming 2 inches from your face, try to diminish me then, okay? You know? So
that's awesome.
I can at least fight back in that way.
Does that bum you out? Because I know when we post something and I see that, because the podcast posts a YouTube feed, and as far as atheism goes, YouTube is kind of the cesspool of atheism. And so when I get an email saying
everything,
that's fair. That's fair. When I get an email that somebody commented on a YouTube video, like I don't want to say like I get like super tense and nervous, but there's a twinge of anxiety there. Like, oh my God, what awful thing did somebody say? Like, like we posted an episode on Australian marriage equality 2 weeks ago now, I think. And I got just this wall of text about how, people who want marriage equality are extremists. And I'm just like, fuck, what? Man, like, yeah. And so, I mean, does it bum you out, like, that you feel like you have to avoid those things? Like this is stuff about your band, and this is something that's, it's a dream come true for you, right? Like, you're signed to an awesome record label, you're about to start touring a whole bunch, and then it's like, there's just that, and I feel like, obviously there are people who would say like, well, you should just, focus on the good, and, but like, is it tough to do that?
Absolutely. It's hard because our brains aren't wired to focus on the good. Human brains are like, we're literally neurologically wired to to focus on things that we are considered threatening, because that was a survival thing. You know, if you get 10 good comments on something and one bad comment, your brain will focus on the one bad comment, because back when we were hunter-gatherers and we're dealing with predators, it was more relevant to focus on the one thing that was a threat to you than all of the good things going on around you. There was the survival mechanism. So it sucks that our brains are wired that way, especially like it's so funny because, you know, we're like a hardcore band. People will tell me that like I'm tough or I'm brave, and I almost never feel like that. I feel like I'm the softest person alive. I'm the biggest crybaby in the universe. I cry when I'm happy. I cry when I'm sad. I cry for no fucking reason. I'm very emotive. I wear my heart on my sleeve. And so it's hard for me because I want to connect with people, even people I don't agree with. I want to be able to connect with them. Human connection is something that's so important to me. And having to basically wall myself off from like a large section of engagement of my stuff, like with my stuff, it's disappointing. It's like, you know, I've had like other friends in bands who are like getting signed and stuff, and I'm like, it must be so fucking nice to just be able to enjoy it and not have to have anxiety every time your label shares something of yours and know that you're never going to be able to read any of the comments. It must be nice to be able to just like, you know, go to a show and get on stage and do your thing without having to worry that somebody's going to try to like sexually harass you. And it makes me really sad. It sucks that that's the world that we exist in today. But I hope that with what this band is trying to do, that on at least some level we'll be able to help create a climate that works towards changing that. Like, you know, I'm not trying to say like we're like the fucking martyrs of like social justice and change in the hardcore scene, because there's a lot of other bands with a lot of other femmes and non-binary people and trans people and women who are working for the same thing. But, you know, we have a pretty big platform right now that like it's our job to use it. So
and I feel like that's got to be amplified by how vulnerable your lyrics are, because vulnerability is a big thing for me. Like I connect really, really hard with that. And and I'm not super familiar with like the hardcore that's out today, so I could have an inaccurate perception of this, but I know when I used to listen to hardcore, you know, 10, 12 years ago, like when I was listening to all the stuff that was current then, there was, I mean, it was a lot of talking about being pissed off and stuff, and that's fine. I don't have a problem with that, but there was no real vulnerability that I could connect with. And I think that's one of the things that I love so much about your lyrics is it's hardcore and it's angry, of course, but that's not all it is. You know what I mean? I mean, it's really like bearing your soul kind of stuff. And so I feel like there's probably a deeper connection that you have than other people might. Am I perceiving that wrong? That your stuff is uniquely vulnerable? Is that a thing that's more common now than it used to be? Or
I think it is more common, which is wonderful. Because it means that connecting with your emotions isn't being seen as like a negative thing for men or for women anymore, which is amazing. I think we're definitely making progress in that realm. There's bands, definitely bands that are getting into like super deep, emotionally vulnerable stuff. If you, my favorite band, Stick to Your Guns, just put out an amazingly like gut level, super vulnerable stuff in there. I highly recommend it. But yeah, there's not a lot of women's vulnerability necessarily, especially in our music. At least it isn't like more mainstream, like, you know, like big bands like that are. I think people are becoming more comfortable with it, but it's kind of like peeling back like the layers of the onion. See, you know, there's a lot of like more emotive hardcore bands or like melodic hardcore bands that are talking about like feelings and self-exploration and that kind of stuff. I do that in ways that like some of those guys, like some of the bands that are fronted by guys like might not be talking about, because, you know, if you're a guy, you're probably not going to be talking about what it's like to express yourself as a woman, just because.
Right.
So,
right.
yeah.
And is that scary?
It unbelievably scary. We have a song called Left for Dead, and it's about rape, and we play it at every show. And I think there's only been like 1 or 2 shows where we didn't play it because I didn't feel safe enough to play the song. But
what was it that made you not feel safe to play it?
Just a climate of extreme toxic masculinity, being in like a vulnerable place myself and not like feeling like I could talk about it. It mostly had to do with the show climate. I remember one show that it literally just felt poisonous. And I was like, I'm not going to get up in front of these people and talk about being raped. I'm not going to do that. Like, and like, we play a lot of shows, and we played a lot of shows we played that song like probably a couple hundred times. So the fact that there was only 1 or 2 instances where I felt like I couldn't do it, I think that's pretty good. But yeah, so we play that song at every show, and I talk about it at every show too. So it's hard. Sometimes you don't want to get up in front of a group of strangers and talk about being raped. I know that might come as a shock to some people.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, there's days where it's very hard, but it's also with that kind of with this kind of music at some point, there's times when it stops being about you. And the times when it's the hardest to get up there, I have to remind myself that there might be a person in the room who might need to hear this song because they experience sexual violence, or someone they know has, and they are looking for resources and they need something to connect to. And that's really what pushes me to keep doing it. Yeah, it's been an extremely long time since like the times that like I couldn't do the song for whatever reason, because now I'm at the point where it's like, yeah, I kind of don't care how bad the climate in the room is. I have something to say and deal with it. So
yeah, I mean, it helps to feel like you're on the job, because
yes.
I mean, I make a habit of being vulnerable. I mean, anybody who listens to the show has heard some of the like most deeply personal stuff that I've ever gone through in my life. But you know, there are still moments where I'm like, you know what, like I'm gonna push the envelope a little more. Like I'm gonna tell this one story that really scares me to tell because it's embarrassing, or you know, because I felt silly for feeling that way, and I do the exact same thing. I'm like, you know, there's probably somebody in the crowd at a conference, or somebody in the audience of the podcast who could get something out of this. And I'm fortunate in the fact that when I do that, I'm continuously rewarded for it, because people do come up to me and say, wow, yeah, I had no idea. Or, you know what, that happened to me too. And I don't feel like I can talk to anybody about it now, but like I feel less alone now. And like, I'm sure you get that at shows too, right?
Oh my God, all the time. It's like, you know, we first started, the first like actual tour that we ever went on was when we like really started like playing that song out, and the response that we got to it, particularly from like really young women, like teenage girls, was a lot. That really, really fucked me up. And it was very eye-opening to how important it is to be discussing issues like sexual violence, you know, in our music scene. Because I was like, I knew that I needed to talk about it, but I didn't realize how much other people needed to hear about it. And that was the point where I was like, it stopped being about me. I was like, this isn't mine anymore. Like this belongs to any young person, or older person, anybody in the audience who hears this and connects to it and needed to hear it. So yeah, that's why it's the same thing. That's why you continue to push yourself to reach out like that, even when it feels like painful and shitty and uncomfortable and scary. So.
You just mentioned hearing from young women in the audience, especially when you talk about, you know, really tough topics like that. Are there a lot of men who listen to your music as well? Because, you know, I'm not familiar with it, but from my very brief exposure to it and looking up lyrics today, it looks like it's pretty heavily feminist focused. And I think, a lot of men would be turned off by that, as they often are. But then there's also the fact that all of your bandmates besides you are men. I think if I read correctly in the interview that I saw.
Yeah, so I'm the only woman in the band. We have another member who is non-binary. So we bring some femme to the mix, but yeah, there's actually a lot of guys who are super into our stuff, which is great. It's funny because like we're about to release our full-length record, and like we get painted as like we're like a feminist hardcore band, which we are. But if you listen to the record, there's only 2 songs that are like pretty much like women exclusive, not even exclusive, but like women or femme-centric in their topic. And there's 11 songs on that record. So there's really something for everybody. And I think that I've definitely noticed that different people connect to different things. You know, we have songs about coming out. We have songs about LGBT like issues. We have songs about atheism. We have songs about how much our current president sucks ass.
And the title of that song,
favorite ever.
Yeah, the title of that song, by the way, for podcast listeners, is "Fuck You, Donald Trump," which is fantastic.
We've really wanted to be subtle.
Right. Yeah. Well, hardcore music is known for subtlety, right? It's about nuance.
It's so funny to me because when we released that song, first of all, like we got a lot of like fucking pissed off Trump supporters, which I'm like, that's fine. I don't give a shit what you think. But they were like, wow. Like, first of all, there were people who were saying, keep politics out of music. I was like, excuse me.
What?
Exactly. I was like, do you know what punk is? Like,
have you ever heard music before?
Have you heard of this band called The Beatles?
Right?
Like,
yeah, people got mad. And then there were also people being like, wow, this band thinks they're so edgy. I'm like, I don't think we're edgy at all. I think that, first of all, I think the title of the song is hilarious. It was kind of intended to be. Like, it's not we're trying to be edgy, fuck Donald Trump thing. I think that hating Donald Trump is like one of the least edgy things ever because he's like
right.
The fucking scum of the earth. I was like, wait a minute, people still fucking like this guy? He's going to get us nuked by North Korea. Like, I didn't know hating someone who like is going to get us all killed was edgy. But if you think that, that's fine. So yeah, there's definitely been some elements to it that have been absolutely hilarious. The best comment, one of the only comments that I have read on stuff, I've read some of the comments on the fuck Donald Trump thing because they're mostly just like people bitching that we don't like Donald Trump. And it's like, I don't care. That's funny. The funniest thing that I read was, and I was like, I can't believe this isn't satire, but it wasn't, was some guy goes, I bet these people don't even stand for the national anthem. Lost my mind.
That's where you're right, kiddo.
Yep.
Jesus Christ.
The sad just killed me. So yeah.
Oh man. One of the things that I always used to say, and this is actually a thing that I miss a lot about music. Like, I feel like I'm a better podcaster and activist than I ever was a musician. And I do feel like I've kind of ended up where I'm supposed to be. Like, if a person who doesn't believe in the supernatural can believe that they're supposed to be a place, but
I feel it. I feel that.
I think there is something unique about the way music can move people, as opposed to like, standing in front of a conference crowd and giving a speech or something like that. Because I used to think about this a lot when we would play shows, and I love all kinds of music, but I think there is something unique about heavy music in the way that it moves people. And I don't know what it is. I don't know if, there's so much of a stigma, I guess, around like anger and aggression. Like in some ways, obviously our society fetishizes it, but in a lot of ways, there's a stigma attached to, and
absolutely.
And heavy music, I feel like
people say, "Why you mad, bro?" Like, as if
right.
being mad in and of itself is a negative thing, as if
right.
having that emotion is negative.
And I mean, do you think that's what's unique about heavy music? Am I right in that, or do you have thoughts on that?
Oh, sure. I think it's like anger is one of the most base level emotions that like a person can feel. And I think that there is a level of, I think people are afraid of it because I think that people are afraid of that side of themselves. But I truly believe that anger, um, if expressed in healthy ways, can be utilized to do amazing things. Like, what so many heavy bands are doing, especially like with politics. But yeah, being able to go to a show and literally scream and just leave all of that there, that frees me to be able to go out into the world as a member of society and not be carrying that anger. I think having healthy ways to express anger like is one of the most important things you can find as a person. And like for me, it's gonna be in screaming on stage. For other people, it's not. So I do think that having an outlet for that is so important.
Well, and I think too about how straightforward most, especially hardcore metal, not so much, but like I love, like one of my all-time favorite bands is La Dispute, right? And La Dispute's lyrics are not straightforward. It's poetry before it's music in a lot of cases, right? And with hardcore, it's a lot more blunt and straightforward. And I use the word simplistic, but I don't mean simplistic in a bad way. It's very straightforward. You don't have to
strip down.
You don't have to think about it a ton. And I think that I think there's power in that too, because when it's said right, like I almost feel like the breakdown part in Clever Girl, that's not poetry, right? But still, it speaks to me on the same level as this like super, and I guess that speaks to what we were talking about before about just being that raw, like I'm just fucking really mad about this, and that taps into that.
The thing you want to say without needing to dress it up or put it in a way that's like quote unquote socially acceptable, like the sit down, shut up. Like how many people have thought that in their lives? Probably everybody has felt sit down, shut up, like that level of anger. And there's something, yeah, you're right. There's something very freeing in not needing to put it delicately or put it eloquently. It's bare, it's raw, it's naked. It is what it is, and that's exciting.
And let's talk about that for a second, because Clever Girl is the first single, or the first like song you released from the album, right?
Uh-huh.
So tell me the story of that song, because it's one of my favorite things in the world.
So the concept for Clever Girl came to me one day when I was online, and I was on like a thread with a bunch of my friends, and there was this guy who was trying to tell me and a bunch of my friends, many of whom of us are survivors of sexual violence. He was trying to tell us how we're supposed to react and respond to sexual violence.
Oh, wow. That's never happened.
Right. Yeah. Like,
ready for this new hot take?
I know. Exactly. I was like, wow, thank you for your illuminating perspective, guy who has never experienced sexual violence ever before in his fucking life, and even said so. And we're like, so why do you feel like you get to tell us how to feel? So, and it was so nauseating and so infuriating. And it's just like, you just wanted to say, like, literally all I could think was sit down, shut up. This is not your conversation. Don't tell me how to fucking feel about my trauma. Fuck you. And that's where Clever Girl came from. I was so fucking mad. And I remember getting in my car that day, just like seething about this. And just with the sit down, shut up kind of like going through my mind. And I was like, this is a song. And I wrote almost all of Clever Girl that day, which doesn't happen that often for me. A lot of times songs come together kind of like piece by piece. There's occasional ones like Clever Girl that kind of like just rage into them and they are spawned that way. But yeah, it's literally I also like the song because it plays on a lot of like that really fun like dinosaur velociraptor imagery that we like to utilize as a band.
Right, because we all know that Jurassic Park is one of the greatest movies ever made.
Absolutely. Exactly. Like, and my day job, I'm a herpetologist. So I work with reptiles and amphibians. And so it's like I kind of get to play with that side of me and bring it into my music side of me. So that's really fun for me. But yeah, I just had this idea of like just like a pack of raptors, just like eviscerating, like for lack of a better term, like, this fucking douchebag. That's the imagery that I brought up for that song. Not like I'm advocating violence against shitty people. I'm not, but this is art, so we get to play loose.
Have you ever considered writing a song about reasonable, respectful discourse and the perks of shitty politics?
And what was that?
Fuck, I messed up the joke. I meant to say respectability politics. Hate myself.
It's funny because I was literally just thinking about that on the way home today, writing about how people tell members of marginalized groups how we're supposed to react to things. Especially, basically respectability politics in and of itself. I kind of get into that a little bit on a song called Give 'Em Hell Kid, which I wrote during the Michael Brown case, like all coming out. And then we actually released that song during the Baltimore uprising. And it is essentially about that. It's like people's right to righteous anger. And the way that they express that, you don't get to dictate. So that's what Give 'Em Hell Kid's about. So yeah, fuck respect.
Right. So what are the plans for the future? What are you guys doing? What's in store?
So we're doing our record release tour is going to be through the beginning of November, playing a bunch of really cool shows. We're playing the Fest down in Gainesville. So that'll probably, by the time this comes out, that'll probably have happened. And then we're playing we're playing a big fest in New Jersey, playing Loud Fest with Knocked Loose, playing Vanna's last show in December. And then in January, February, we are going on a full US tour with The White Noise, Stray from the Path, and Anti-Flag, which is, yeah.
That's awesome.
I told you it was a big one. Which is that is the most unbelievable opportunity I have ever been given in my life. And I cannot express my gratitude at being even able to like mention my name along with those musicians. Like I've been listening to Anti-Flag since I was like 15 years old. Stray from the Path is one of my favorite bands of all time. And those two bands in particular, they're among the most vocal political bands in music. So it's going to be extremely intense. And I'm so excited to be touring with such like-minded bands politically, and that we're going to get to all support each other in that way. It's just an amazing opportunity. And I appreciate so much that Anti-Flag and Stray from the Path invited us to come. That really means.
Why don't you ever play with any fascist bands? Like, you think you need to represent all sides and have a conversation?
Yeah, we got to be fair. We got to be fair and balanced here.
I'd also like to not die at one of my shows.
Right. I think that's a fair ask.
I'm just saying. I'm a woman. I'm queer and I'm Jewish. So I'd really like to not die. Like the Nazi march is probably not the place that Sharptooth is going to be hanging out without at least some serious security.
You'd be able to convince so many people in the free marketplace of ideas.
I know, right?
Because we always know the best ideas win.
Yeah, right?
Oh God, I feel dirty just like letting those words come out of my mouth, even as satire. Ugh, that's
I'm
gross.
gonna clip that out and start using it in various places.
We are impure now.
And tell me, what's the record called again? When's it come out? Where can people find more about your band?
So the record is called Clever Girl, and it comes out on October 27th. And you can find out more about Sharptooth on our Facebook. You can go to Pure Noise's website, check out our stuff that's on there. We have like pre-orders, and like you can find the record on there. And we're on Spotify, we're on iTunes, pretty much any place that you can find music, you will be able to find Clever Girl once it comes out. So, hooray!
And that, my friends, is going to do it for this episode of the Gay Atheist Manifesto. We are a proud member of the Trans Podcaster Visibility Initiative. We are a group of trans podcasting badasses working to bring more trans voices into podcasting and other content creation. Search for the Trans Podcaster Visibility Initiative on Facebook for more info. You can find the show on Facebook at facebook.com/thegaytheistmanifesto. You can email us at thegaytheistmanifesto@gmail.com. I'm on Twitter at GaytheistCallie. You can find the show on Twitter at TheGaytheists. And Ari, you're up.
Review from user KawaiChibi69. Ari Stillman came promptly and in good condition after I ordered it. Being Facebook friends has so far been a good experience, and I like the security and peace of mind that comes with being able to email aristillman4@gmail.com whenever I have a problem with the product. The Sis Are Getting Out of Hand podcast is also a nice bonus that comes with it for free. But seriously, what is up with the SJW Circle Jerk podcast? It gave me horrible stomach cramps and diarrhea, and it really drags down the whole Ari experience. Getting Ari's exclusive patron-only psychology show by giving $3 a month on patreon.com/Ari Stillman makes up for it, though. Overall, it works as expected, and it's good for the price. I would recommend it if you're willing to overlook a few minor hiccups. 3.5 out of 5 stars.
If you want to support the show and the activism we do, you can head to patreon.com/thegaytheistmanifesto and make a per episode donation as little as $1 per episode. And if you can't do that, you can head over to iTunes and give us a 5-star review. That helps us move up in the rankings and get heard by more people. Before we go, I want you to know that if you're lost, you're hurting, you're scared, if you feel like no one cares and no one understands, you need to know there's a community out here that loves you, cares for you, knows that you're capable of amazing things and that you are worthy of love. If you're struggling, please don't be afraid to reach out. Until next time, friends, this is the Gay Atheist Manifesto.